I never thought a single morning could unravel my entire life. But looking back, maybe I should have seen the warning signs. The growing distance, the way Ethan had started looking at me differently, like he was measuring his patience every time I spoke. It started like any other weekday. I was rushing through the kitchen, still in my silk robe, brushing out my hair with one hand while flipping eggs with the other. My brother Tyler sat at the dining table, scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the chaos around him. Ethan, my husband, sat across from him, drinking his usual black coffee, looking tired, distant. Annoying. I don't know why, but his silence had started getting on my nerves lately. It wasn't like before when he used to ask about my day, or smile when I walked into a room. Lately, everything I did seemed to irritate him. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was something else. But that morning I was too focused on more important things. "Baby," I said sweetly, sliding into the chair beside him. "Tyler's got some big plans coming up, and he needs a little help to get started." Ethan barely looked up from his coffee. "What kind of help?" "A financial boost," I said, flashing him a smile. "Just something small, your credit card for a few things. He'll pay it back." Tyler, of course, was too proud to ask himself. That's how he worked. He liked when I did the talking for him, when I handled things. It made sense. Ethan had the money and he barely spent it on anything. Meanwhile, Tyler was struggling. Ethan finally set his coffee down. "No." I blinked. "No. You heard me," he said, meeting my eyes. "Your brother is a grown man, Lauren. If he needs money, he can work for it." My fingers curled into the table. "Are you serious?" "Just a little favor. I help your family all the time." "You help my family because you want to," he said, his voice even cold. "I'm not giving him my credit card." Tyler let out a low scoff. I could feel his disappointment radiating across the table, and suddenly a sharp, hot anger flared in my chest. "You're being selfish," I spat. "This is my brother we're talking about. You wouldn't even miss the money." Ethan didn't flinch. He just stared at me with that same blank, emotionless expression, the one that had been making my skin crawl for months now. I could feel my breath coming quicker, the frustration bubbling under my skin like a boiling kettle. "Lauren," he said calmly. I said no. Before I could stop myself, my hand shot out, grabbing the steaming cup of coffee beside me, and I threw it in his face. A sharp gasp filled the kitchen. Tyler's, maybe mine, I don't know. But Ethan barely reacted. He sucked in a slow breath, his jaw tightening as the scalding liquid dripped down his cheek onto his shirt. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just reached for a napkin, dabbing his face with a terrifying, eerie calm. I expected him to explode, to shout, to fight, to storm out. But instead he just looked at me. And then he stood up. "Give him your things or get out," I shrieked, my voice echoing through the kitchen. "If you can't even do this for my family, then maybe you shouldn't be part of it." Ethan didn't argue. He just grabbed his phone, turned his back on me, and walked upstairs. The silence that followed was suffocating. Tyler let out a low whistle. "Damn. Think you pushed him too far." I rolled my eyes, shaking off the lingering tension in my chest. "He's just being dramatic. He'll get over it." But something about the way Ethan had looked at me, the quiet, chilling finality of it, made my stomach twist. I shoved the feeling away and grabbed my purse. I had a job to get to. By the time I returned, nothing in my life would be the same. The day at work was uneventful. I spent most of it venting to my coworkers about Ethan's latest act of selfishness, letting them confirm what I already knew. He was being ridiculous. They agreed without hesitation. Why was he so uptight about money? He made plenty, and if I needed to help my brother, what was the big deal? Still, the way he had looked at me before walking upstairs stuck in my mind like a splinter. Not anger, not hurt, just resolution. Like he had made some kind of decision. By the time I was pulling into the driveway, Tyler was already in the passenger seat beside me, grinning. "Bet he's cooled off by now," he said. "We'll talk some sense into him." I smirked, shaking my head. "Oh, he's going to be groveling. Just watch." But the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The house was silent. Not just the usual after-work quiet, but empty quiet. The kind that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The air felt still, lifeless. I called out, but there was no answer. No sound of the TV, no scent of dinner being made. Just the echo of my heels against the tile as I walked further inside. And then I saw it. Or rather, I didn't see it. Everything was gone. The couch, the dining table, the paintings on the walls. Everything that had filled our home was missing. My breath hitched as I rushed through the living room, my pulse pounding. The bookshelves were bare. The coffee table was gone. The console where Ethan kept his keys. Empty. What the hell? Tyler muttered behind me. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time, my heart slamming against my ribs. The bedroom, our bedroom, was stripped down to nothing. The bed frame was there, but the mattress was gone. The dresser stood open, Ethan's drawers emptied. His closet, completely bare. It looked like no one had ever lived here at all. I spun around, my breathing ragged, panic flooding my veins. Ethan! I shouted, my voice cracking. Silence. Then, a voice. Not Ethan's. I turned sharply toward the front door. Standing in the entryway was a man in a sharp black suit, holding a leather folder and looking entirely too comfortable for someone who had just walked into my home uninvited. "Mrs. Carter?" the man asked politely. I blinked, my mind scrambling. Who the hell are you?" He smiled, crisp and professional. "My name is Greg Lawson. I'm with Platinum Realty. We spoke briefly earlier, but I imagine your husband didn't mention that." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He glanced down at his folder, flipping through the papers casually. "This property was officially sold at noon today. We've been coordinating the final paperwork and logistics. The new owner will be moving in next week, though they've requested a cleaning service to come through first." His voice was calm, businesslike, as if he had just told me the weather forecast. The words took a second to register. "Sold? My house?" I let out a strangled laugh. "You're joking." "I assure you I am not," he said, offering me the documents in his hand. "You'll find all the signatures in order." Mr. Carter was quite thorough. I believe he even made arrangements to have his belongings removed earlier today. A sharp ringing filled my ears. This wasn't happening. This had to be some kind of mix-up. I grabbed the papers, flipping through them frantically. My eyes darted to the signatures at the bottom. Ethan's name. Signed. Sealed. Final. He really did it. He left me. And he took everything with him. Tyler let out a low whistle. "Damn." I turned to the realtor, shaking the papers at him. "He can't do this. This is my house." "Actually," Greg corrected gently, "the deed was solely in Mr. Carter's name. As such, he had full legal authority to sell the property." The air in the room grew thick, suffocating. My chest heaved as I struggled to process it all. I had told Ethan to get out. But I never thought he actually would. Not like this. Not with everything. And not before I had the chance to fix things. The floor beneath me felt like it was crumbling. Everything I had built, everything I had relied on was gone in an instant. And for the first time in years, I had no idea what to do next. I stood in the middle of my empty living room, gripping the paperwork so tightly my nails nearly tore through the pages. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Tyler stood beside me, hands in his pockets, glancing around with an unreadable expression. The realtor, Greg Lawson or whatever his name was, remained calm, professional, waiting for me to process what had just happened. "Where is he?" I demanded, my voice sharp, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. Greg tilted his head slightly. "I'm not at liberty to say. Mr. Carter requested that all inquiries regarding his whereabouts be directed to his attorney." Attorney. My stomach twisted at the word. This wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment act of defiance. Ethan had planned this. Carefully. Methodically. He hadn't just left. He had erased himself from my life, ensuring I had no way to pull him back. I turned to Tyler, my hands shaking. "Say something." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "What do you want me to say, Lauren? He's gone. You pushed him and he actually left." I flinched. "I didn't push him. He was being selfish." Tyler held up a hand. "Spare me the speech, all right? Ethan was a good guy. Pushover, yeah, but solid. And now? He's done." I shot him a glare. "You're really taking his side?" "I'm taking reality's side," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "What the hell are you gonna do now?" I didn't have an answer. Greg cleared his throat, bringing my attention back to him. Mrs. Carter, I understand this is unexpected, but you should be aware that the new owner expects the house to be vacated within the next 48 hours. Legally, you are no longer a resident of this property. I let out a breathless, bitter laugh. You're kicking me out of my own house? Greg's expression remained impassive. Legally, this was never your house. It belongs solely to Mr. Carter. The words hit like a slap. I had lived here for 6 years, decorated every inch of it, hosted our friends, built a life inside these walls. And now I was being told that none of it had ever truly been mine. I refused to cry. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I straightened my shoulders. Fine, I said, forcing steel into my voice. Then I'll find him myself. Greg merely nodded. You're free to do that. But I should warn you, Mr. Carter was very thorough. He's not looking to be found. His words unsettled me. Ethan wasn't just angry. He had disappeared. I turned on my heel and stormed upstairs, my mind racing. My bedroom, no, his bedroom was stripped clean, the closets empty, the shelves bare. I yanked open drawers, cabinets, anything that might give me a clue as to where he had gone. Nothing. His phone was disconnected. His emails wiped. Even our shared bank account, when I checked the app on my phone, was closed. Everything was gone. Panic clawed at my throat. Lauren. Tyler called from downstairs. What now? I didn't know. I had always been the one in control, the one who dictated how things went in our relationship. Ethan had been the reliable one, the one who never questioned, never challenged. I had never considered that he might leave, not really. Not like this. And now? I had nothing. A low hum of fear settled deep in my bones. I had underestimated him. And that was my first mistake. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's blank, emotionless face from that morning. The way he had calmly wiped the coffee off his skin. The way he had stood up and walked away without a single word. Now I knew why. He had already decided. I paced the empty bedroom, my phone clenched tightly in my hand, refreshing my messages even though I knew there would be nothing. His number was still disconnected. His emails were deactivated. Every shared account we had was either frozen or completely wiped. He hadn't just left. He had vanished. Tyler sat on the stripped mattress, scrolling through his phone, his expression unreadable. You know, you could just accept that he's gone. I spun toward him. That's easy for you to say. You're not the one he abandoned. Tyler snorted. I'm not the one who threw coffee in his face and told him to get out either. Don't start. He lifted his hands in surrender. I'm just saying, Lauren, this might be karma or something. Karma. The word tasted bitter. I was angry at Ethan for leaving, but more than that, I was furious that he had done it in a way that left me scrambling. No warning, no fight, no chance for me to fix things. Just silence and an empty house. I refused to accept that. I took a deep breath, forcing my mind to focus. If Ethan had left, he had to have gone somewhere. I just had to find out where. I opened my laptop and started searching. I checked his social media first, nothing. His accounts were still up, but inactive. No new updates, no traces of his location. I tried tracking our old bank transactions, but his name was completely wiped from the records. Whatever he had done it fast. Damn, Tyler muttered from across the room. He really covered his tracks. I swallowed the rising panic. Ethan was always predictable. He had his routines, his habits, the places he liked to go. I just had to find one crack, one weak spot in his plan where he had left a trail. And then I found it. His gym membership. I clicked into the online account, my heart hammering. He had deactivated his email, changed his phone number, and shut down everything tied to our finances, but his gym membership? Still active. There was a recent check-in from this morning. I grinned. Gotcha. Tyler raised a brow. You're seriously gonna track him down at a gym? I just need to see him, I muttered. Make him talk to me. Because that was the part one still couldn't understand. Why had he left so easily? Why didn't he fight? Why had he just let go? And more importantly, what was I supposed to do next? I barely took the time to throw on something presentable before I rushed out the door. My mind raced with possibilities, each more absurd than the last. Maybe Ethan had checked in at the gym because he hadn't finished moving everything. Maybe he was staying with a friend. Maybe, just maybe, this was all some kind of elaborate stunt, a test to see how I'd react. He wouldn't just leave me. Not really. Tyler refused to come with me, muttering something about not wanting to be part of my insanity spiral. But I didn't care. I drove across town, barely stopping at red lights, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. The gym was a sleek, high-end place Ethan had joined a few years back when he got serious about fitness. I had always teased him about it. He wasn't exactly the gym rat type, but he loved his routine. That was what I was counting on. I parked and stormed inside, ignoring the friendly nod from the receptionist. The scent of sweat and industrial cleaner filled my nostrils as I scanned the floor, searching for Ethan. But he wasn't there. The weight racks were filled with guys lifting in front of mirrors, and the treadmills whirred with movement, but none of them were him. I clenched my jaw and headed for the front desk. "Excuse me," I said, forcing a polite smile. "I'm looking for Ethan Carter. He checked in today, tall, dark hair, usually wears black." The receptionist, a young woman with blonde highlights and an annoyingly bright smile, tapped at her keyboard. Yeah, he was here earlier. Checked in around 7:30 this morning." My pulse quickened. "That was just a few hours ago. Do you know if he's still here?" She frowned. No, he checked out about an hour later." My stomach dropped. "Did he say where he was going?" She gave me a look, like I was some crazy ex-girlfriend stalking a man who wanted nothing to do with her. "We don't track our members, ma'am." I swallowed my frustration and forced another smile. "Right. Thanks." I turned and walked out, my heart pounding. I had been so sure I'd find him here. This had been my lead, my one shot at figuring out where he had gone. And now it was another dead end. I leaned against my car, gripping my forehead, trying to think. If he wasn't staying in the house and he wasn't at the gym, where was he? I didn't even realize I was shaking until my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message. I yanked it out, praying it was Ethan. But it wasn't. It was an unknown number. "Lauren, stop looking for me. This is over." I stared at the screen, rereading the words until they blurred together. This was over? No, it wasn't. I gritted my teeth and typed back furiously. "You don't get to disappear like this. You owe me a conversation." A few seconds passed. Then another message. "I don't owe you anything." My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't Ethan. Not the Ethan I knew. Not the Ethan I had built a life with. He was really gone. I clenched the phone in my fist, staring at the empty parking lot, at the world moving around me like nothing had changed. But my world had just shattered. And for the first time, I had no idea how to put it back together. I stared at the phone screen, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the traffic around me. "I don't owe you anything." Ethan had never spoken to me like that before. Not in 10 years of marriage, not even during our worst fights. There had always been tension, sure. Arguments. But he had never shut me out completely. Until now. I sucked in a breath, forcing myself to focus. He was cutting me off, severing the last thread between us with clean surgical precision. He had planned this every single step. And I hadn't even seen it coming. I jabbed out another text with shaking fingers. "Where are you staying? We need to talk." 3 dots appeared, then vanished. I stared at the screen for another full minute, but no reply came. He was done. I fought the urge to scream, to throw my phone at the pavement and shatter it into pieces. But that wouldn't bring Ethan back. That wouldn't change what had already happened. What I needed was a plan. I climbed into my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. If Ethan thought he could just erase me from his life without consequences, he was dead wrong. I still had options. I still had power. Tyler was waiting for me when I got back to the house. His house now, I reminded myself bitterly. He was sprawled across the bare living room floor, scrolling through his phone, completely unbothered. "Any luck?" he asked without looking up. I slammed the door behind me. "He's ignoring me." Tyler snorted. "Yeah, shocking." I threw my purse on the kitchen counter and whirled to face him. "You think this is funny?" He shrugged. "I think you picked the wrong guy to screw with. You always thought Ethan would just roll over and take whatever you threw at him." He gestured around the empty house. "Guess not." He crawled up my neck. He blindsided me. He didn't even give me a chance to fix things. Tyler sat up, resting his arms on his knees. Fix what, Lauren? You told him to get out. He listened. End of story. I clenched my fists, swallowing the angry retort bubbling up in my throat. No, this wasn't the end of the story. I refused to believe that. I needed a way to find him. And I knew exactly where to start. Ethan's workplace was a towering glass building in the heart of downtown. I had been here plenty of times before, bringing him coffee, dropping off lunch when he forgot it, even attending holiday parties with his colleagues. Today I walked in with purpose. The receptionist, a young man with tortoiseshell glasses, looked up with a polite smile. Can I help you? I smiled sweetly. I'm here to see Ethan Carter. He frowned. I'm sorry, but Mr. Carter is no longer with the company. My stomach dropped. What? He resigned 3 days ago, the receptionist said, adjusting his glasses. His departure was effective immediately. I felt the blood drain from my face. He hadn't just left me. He had left everything. Did he say where he was going? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The receptionist shook his head. No, but he did leave a message in case anyone asked for him. He turned to his computer, typed something, then slid a small piece of paper across the counter. There were only 4 words written on it. Let it go, Lauren. A cold chill crept up my spine. This wasn't just about the house. This was a message. He wasn't running. He was making sure I couldn't follow it. I stared at the piece of paper in my hands, the words burning into my brain. Let it go, Lauren. No, I wouldn't. I couldn't. Ethan had erased himself from my life like I was nothing. He had abandoned our home, our marriage, and even his job, all without a second thought. He was treating me like I was disposable. But he underestimated me. I turned on my heel and stormed out of the building, my mind spinning. If Ethan had quit his job, that meant he had another plan. A new source of income. A destination. He wasn't the type to just disappear without securing himself first. Which meant I had one last option. I needed to find someone who still knew where he was. I drove straight to the one person I never thought I'd have to rely on. His best friend. Ryan Matthews had been Ethan's closest friend since college. They worked in the same industry, had taken countless trips together, and had a bond one had never fully understood. Ethan trusted Ryan. If there was anyone who knew where he had gone, it was him. I pulled up outside Ryan's apartment and slammed my car door shut. I had never liked him. Always thought he was a little too smug, a little too protective of Ethan, but today I needed him. I knocked hard. A moment later, the door opened, and there he was, Ryan, standing in a gray t-shirt and sweatpants, staring at me like I was an unwanted solicitor. Lauren, he said, folding his arms. What the hell are you doing here? I didn't bother with pleasantries. Where is he? Ryan let out a short, humorless laugh. You've got some nerve. I clenched my fists. Don't play dumb. You know exactly where he is. His face darkened. Even if I did, why the hell would I tell you? I gritted my teeth. Because I deserve answers. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, shaking his head. No, Lauren. You don't. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Ryan, listen to me. I don't know what Ethan told you, but he told me everything. Ryan cut in. His voice was sharp, his eyes cold. How you treated him. How you made him feel like he was never enough. How you threw coffee in his face because he wouldn't hand over his money like an ATM. My stomach twisted. Ryan took a step forward, his expression unreadable. Do you even realize what you did to him? The way you chipped away at him, year after year, until he finally woke up and realized he didn't have to take it anymore. I swallowed hard. You broke him, Lauren, Ryan said, his voice low. And now you're pissed because he finally fixed himself. A lump formed in my throat, but I forced myself to keep my composure. I just want to talk to him. Ryan scoffed. Too bad. He doesn't want to talk to you. He started to close the door, but I shoved my foot in the way. Ryan, please. For the first time, something flickered across his face, pity. Lauren, he said quietly. It's over. The door shut in my face. I stood there, motionless, my chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven breaths. Ryan was wrong. This wasn't over. Not yet. Ethan had to have left a trail somewhere. I just had to find it. I sat in my car outside Ryan's apartment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. His words rang in my ears over and over. It's over. No, it wasn't. Ethan thought he could just vanish, just cut me off like I was nothing. He thought he could erase me from his life and start fresh, like our marriage had never happened. He was wrong. I pulled out my phone and stared at our old text messages. He had wiped himself from everything. His bank accounts, his job, even his own friends were covering for him. But there was one thing Ethan never ignored. His mother. 30 minutes later, I was pulling into the quiet suburban neighborhood where she lived. Ethan's mom, Judith, had never liked me much. She was polite, sure, but there had always been a quiet disapproval in her eyes. She thought I was too demanding, too pushy. Maybe she was right, but today I didn't care. I needed answers. I rang the doorbell, forcing my breathing to stay even. The curtains moved slightly before the door opened. Judith stood there in a simple cardigan and slacks, her sharp blue eyes scanning me with immediate suspicion. "Lauren," she said, her voice cool. I swallowed. "Hi, Judith. I was hoping we could talk." She didn't move. "About Ethan." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I think you've done quite enough to my son." I clenched my fists. "Look, I just need to know where he is. That's all." A bitter laugh escaped her. "So you can drag him back into your mess?" My patience was wearing thin. "Judith, please. I know he spoke to you." He wouldn't just disappear without telling his mother. Something flickered in her expression. Just for a second. "Gotcha." I took a step forward. "I don't need all the details. I need to hear it from him. If he's really done with me, I need him to say it to my face." She studied me, her eyes scanning for weakness, for sincerity. Then finally she sighed. "I don't know exactly where he is," she admitted. "But I do know he's staying somewhere by the coast." The coast. That narrowed it down. Ethan had always loved the beach. It was his escape, his reset whenever life got overwhelming. And now he had run there. Judith leaned against the doorframe. "You should leave him alone, Lauren." I met her gaze. "I can't." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I figured as much." I turned to leave, but then she added, "He's staying under a different name." I froze. "What?" She nodded. "I don't know what it is, but he mentioned it when we last spoke. He's covering his tracks, Lauren. He doesn't want to be found." A shiver ran down my spine. Ethan had gone this far to disappear. And yet I was still chasing him. I didn't know what I would do when I found him, but I would find him. The drive to the coast felt endless. Every mile stretched my patience thinner. Every passing sign fueled my desperation. Ethan thought he could disappear, but I knew him better than that. He wasn't built to start over. He needed structure, familiarity. And I knew exactly where to look. The beach house. Years ago, before we were married, Ethan had inherited a small cottage from his grandfather. A quiet, secluded place tucked along the cliffs of the coastline. It had always been his sanctuary, a retreat when life became overwhelming. He rarely visited in recent years, but in my gut I knew he was there. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, my heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the ocean waves crashing against the shore. His car was there. I sucked in a shaky breath. He hadn't changed his license plates. He hadn't completely erased himself. He had left me, yes. But he hadn't buried his past entirely. That meant I still had a chance. I stepped out of the car, my heels crunching against the loose gravel. The house stood before me, its weathered wooden exterior bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. Ethan was inside. I could feel it. I marched up the porch steps, not bothering to knock. The door was unlocked, and I pushed it open, stepping inside. The scent of salt and aged wood filled my nostrils. The place was barely furnished. A couch, a coffee table, a small dining set. A duffel bag sat near the door, half-zipped. And then I saw him. Ethan stood by the window, his back to me, staring out at the ocean. His shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around. For the first time since he left, I hesitated. I had rehearsed this moment over and over in my head. I had imagined yelling at him, demanding answers, forcing him to look at me and explain why he had erased me from his life like I was nothing. But now, standing here, I felt something different. Something like fear. I cleared my throat. "You really thought I wouldn't find you?" Slowly, Ethan turned. The moment our eyes met, I realized something. This wasn't the same man I had been married to. There was no anger, no regret, just calm. He had made his decision, and he wasn't coming back. "You need to leave, Lauren," he said, his voice steady. I swallowed hard. "You don't get to decide that." His jaw tightened. "Actually, I do." I took a step closer. "You can't just walk away from our life like it never existed." "Yes, I can," he said simply. And I did. His words sliced through me. I shook my head, forcing out a bitter laugh. "You really think you can just start over? That I'm just going to disappear from your life?" Ethan exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. "Lauren, I don't love you anymore." The world tilted. I took a step back, my breath hitching. I had expected him to be angry. I had expected him to be hurt. But this was worse. This was indifference. I opened my mouth to argue, to plead, but nothing came out. For the first time in my life, I had nothing to say. Ethan turned back to the window, looking out at the waves. "This is over," he said softly. "Go home." I stood there for what felt like an eternity. And then finally I turned and walked out. I don't remember the drive home. The sun had set, and the highway stretched ahead in a blur of streetlights and shadows. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, but my mind was numb. Ethan's voice still rang in my ears. "I don't love you anymore." I had chased him to the ends of the earth, convinced myself that if I just found him, if I just made him talk, I could fix this. I could remind him of what we had. But there was nothing left to fix. He hadn't been angry. He hadn't fought. He had simply let go. And that terrified me more than anything. When I got back to the house that no longer belonged to me, I half expected Tyler to be gone too. But he was still there, lounging on the couch with his feet up on the coffee table, scrolling through his phone like he had all the time in the world. He barely glanced at me as I walked in. "So? Did you find him?" I dropped my purse onto the kitchen counter, my hands trembling. "Yeah." Tyler smirked. "And?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because saying it out loud would make it real. I grabbed a glass and filled it with water, my throat suddenly dry. But I didn't drink it. I just stood there, staring at the empty space where Ethan's things used to be. It was over. Really truly over. Tyler sighed. "Look, Lauren, I know you don't want to hear this, but maybe it's time to." "Don't," I snapped, turning to glare at him. "Not tonight." His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something different in them. Pity. And I hated it. I turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. My whole life had just collapsed in front of me, and Tyler was sitting here like none of it mattered. Like I didn't matter. "You're gonna be fine," he said eventually, stretching his arms over his head. "You always land on your feet." I laughed bitterly. "You sure about that?" He didn't answer. And maybe that was answer enough. I barely slept that night. I lay awake in the empty bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. The morning I threw the coffee. The way Ethan walked away. The empty house. The text messages. The way he looked at me in that beach house like I was already a memory. At some point I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the blinds. And my phone was buzzing. I reached for it blindly, my heart pounding. For a second I hoped it was Ethan. That maybe, just maybe, he had changed his mind. But it wasn't him. It was a message from an unknown number. "Hope it was worth it. Because now you have nothing." My blood ran cold. I sat up, gripping the phone, reading the words over and over. And then slowly I realized, Ethan hadn't just left me. He had destroyed me. No money. No house. No backup plan. He had taken everything. And I had let him. I clenched my jaw, my breathing sharp and ragged. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't break. Not yet. But as I stared at the empty room around me, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning.